Well, greetings, people of the internet. Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, we're going to play around with that AMD Epyc server that Sakura made me build. So yeah, the AMD Epyc. It's back here on the rack. Sakura helped me design and build that thing with some aftermarket or used parts on eBay. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to install Windows Server 2022 on there. I don't know why, I just feel like it. I want to try something. So I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to show you how exactly it is I install Windows Server 2022 and set it up on an Active Directory domain, and how I install and configure Hyper-V on it. So why don't you come along with me and we'll see how that's done. So here we are. We're on one of the nice things about buying a server grade motherboard is you have IPMI or IKVM, which means I can sit down at the machine like I were on had a keyboard, video, and a mouse connected to it. It's right behind me here on the rack. But I'm able to do this remotely over a separate, dedicated, well, little computer on a chip or computer on a network card that gives me keyboard, video, and mouse access over a separate network interface. So it's real handy to have if you're going to be building a server at home. Now, I've connected up virtually and I've installed Windows Server 2022. What I have not done is done the initial configuration of it after its initial reboot, and it looks like it's rebooting again, and eventually it will bring me up to a doubt. You can see it is rebooting again, but I just wanted to talk about how I'm doing this. Yes, I had Proxmox installed on this. Yes, it was running well. But I want to play with this unit. This is why I bought this unit, so I could play around with it in a lab environment. I've used Proxmox on it. I know it works well. But now I want to get my feet wet with Windows Server 2022 and Hyper-V and using the video cards in Linux machines and passing them through, but I want to do it under Windows this time. So what I'm going to do is share with you my basic Windows install. I'm also going to install Hyper-V in this video as well. So for those of you that don't know how to set up Windows Server 2022 or how to set up Hyper-V, you'll find this handy. And then once we get the machine built, then we can start doing some really fun stuff with it and, you know, passing through video cards and whatnot, seeing if we can figure that out. So right now I'm just going to give it a super secret password. Now I'm going to take you through here soup to nuts on how I do this, so you know that we won't, oops, sorry about that. We won't be keeping this username. We'll be changing it. And keep in mind also that all of my Windows servers, I join them to my domain, the ujp.local. So if you're not sure of how to do something like that, you might want to go back and look at one of my previous videos on how to set up a domain controller, that kind of thing. But for now, we'll just log in and get this, get the initial setup done. That's what I want you to see. All right, so it is installed in Server Manager by default. Is going to come up. I'm just going to tell it yes, I want to be a member of this network. Now, keep in mind, this machine has like, oh, I don't know, 2 NICs on it, 3 NICs on it. I'm not quite sure. We'll find out here in a second. And it also has a 10 gig NIC in here. So what I do is I come here to the local server on Server Manager and I just click on one of these Ethernet addresses. So here's what we have. We have 2 Intel 210 gigabit network cards built in. They're both 1 gigabit network adapters. One is going to be disabled. So I'm just going to right click on it and disable it. Isn't that great? I'm going to rename this one. I'm going to call this Gigabit 1-1. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a hard-coded IP address because I know what I want that to be. By default, Windows Server, when it installs, puts it in DHCP mode, but I want a dedicated IP. And my router's at 5.254. And then I use my local DNS servers. 168, 5.15, and 14. And the system is smart enough to know that if one of those two DNS servers is down, it will forward it on to the one that is available. So close that, and we'll come back here and refresh, and we should see yes. Now, Ethernet 3, I didn't do something while I was here, so I'm going to click on this. And we're going to right-click on that. We'll rename that. We're going to call that Gigabit 10. But I don't have it hooked up right now, so let's just go ahead and disable it so it doesn't show up in Server Manager and confuse things. Very good. So, what did we call this? What did we call this machine? Let's go find out. We called it Super Epyc. So we're going to go here to computer name, and it's not here. This is a description. We want to change the name. So we click on change, and then we go here to Super Epyc. Wow, cool. Tell it okay. Now, anytime you do anything like rename the computer, you have to reboot. I'm not going to do that right now because I also want to change the time. I want the time zone to be in Central Time. Make sure that's right. This all looks, I'm refreshing the screen now. And it should update the time. It won't update the computer name because it hasn't rebooted. So now I'm going to go ahead and reboot. You don't need to watch that. But yeah, you do need to reboot, and they'll come back, configure some more. So welcome back. We're logging in again, and get ready because we're going to have to reboot a couple more times. Now, normally once you get Windows installed, you would turn on remote desktop and just come in through remote desktop and do what you need to do. But because we're going to install Hyper-V on here, Windows still does something really kooky. And anytime you add something like Hyper-V, it screws with your network adapters. So that's why I do it through the IPMI or the IKVM interface instead. So it looks like the Server Manager screen is finished updating. I don't see a little bar going across. So I'm going to go to Manage. I'm going to go to Add Roles and Features. Click on Next here. I'm going to do a role-based or feature-based install. Click on Next. This is very important. If you have an auto-configured IP address here, you're going to have problems. That's why my first step in this was to set up a dedicated IP address. So make sure you've got a dedicated or a hard-coded IP address in here and not a DHCP or an auto-config, or it could cause problems. I'm going to click on Next, and then I'm just going to select Hyper-V right here. I'm going to add the features. Click on Next, click on Next, click on Next. It's going to tell us what adapter do you want to be the Hyper-V virtual network adapter. Well, Gigabit 1.1. Now you see why I labeled these network adapters, right? So you can identify them cleanly. And I am going to allow the server to send and receive migration of virtual machines. I want to use Kerberos because I'm on a domain network. So we'll click Next. Don't worry about too much about where the default stores are. We've got to configure we've got to partition our hard drive yet, our SSD drive or NVMe drive. So we'll just get through the install here. Go ahead and click on Install. Now this is going to take a few minutes to install. And then when it's done, it's going to want you to reboot your system for the changes to take effect. So once this is finished, go out, reboot your machine, come back in, log back in, and then come back and join me at the next screen after I've done the reboot. All right, so we've installed Hyper-V and we've rebooted. And now you're going to notice when we come up here, some stuff has changed. The name is right, but now you can see that the Ethernet adapter's got this long convoluted name, and the IP address is now assigned by DHCP. Microsoft, you naughty, naughty people. So let's click on that and let's fix that. So you see what it's done is it's created a new virtual Ethernet adapter based on this one right here. Don't mess with this one. All your changes need to be here. And in fact, the first thing we need to do is rename this. So I'm going to call this Gigabit 1-1-Vert so I can tell the difference between the two. And this is one of the things, really, Linux, they just make it so easy under Windows to label your devices. I suppose there's a way to do it under Linux, and I just haven't figured out how to do it. But goodness gracious, folks, just some things should be done through a GUI. And you notice now I need to come back in and enter my hard-coded IP address. If I can remember how to type and ignore that. Now, one thing it's going to do, and you'll see it here, is it's left the gateway in. But once I click through this, if you've been with me on this journey before, these are my DNS servers. I use my local. Is that once I click OK here, it's going to lose that setting. Again, another glitch in the Microsoft matrix. So you just have to be mindful of that. And come in here and enter it again. All right, then we can close that. And now if we refresh the screen, you'll see that it's much more manageable on Server Manager, right? It looks nicer. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is, now that we've got Active Directory, or now that we have Hyper-V installed, I want to join this to my existing domain. So I'm going to come up here under Workgroup, click on Change, and I'm going to type in my domain, which is Unky Joe's Playhouse, ujp.local. And now, since I have the correct DNS servers in there, it should resolve it and ask me for my administrative login for the domain. So I'm going to enter that, click on OK. And it's going to welcome me to the domain, and then we're going to reboot one more time. Well, one of many more times. And I'll show you what we do once we come back from the reboot. All right, so we made it through another reboot. However, we still can't connect up remotely. We have one more thing to do, and it's very important here. Now, once you've joined the domain, you have to pay attention. And that is to log in as a domain administrator. So you need to select other user. You'll notice here now it says, it shows your domain name here. Mine would be UJP because I named it ujp.local. So I'm going to log in as Adama and my super secret password. And then it should log me in and come up to the Server Manager screen eventually. It's almost dinner time, folks. Ooh, I get a fresh cup of coffee. Coffee is good. All right, so let's go back here to local server. You'll see Hyper-V is now installed. But you notice, okay, so everything looks good. We're joined to a domain. The Defender firewall I've got turned off. Reasons. We won't get into those in this video. And it's got the IP address, it's got the gateway, everything looks good except for one thing, and that is remote desktop is disabled. So when I click on there and I'm going to allow remote desktop connections to that computer, apply and OK. And then I can safely log out. Come here, sign out. And then I can connect up via remote desktop. So let's do that next. So I've got my remote desktop connection up here, and I'm going to enter 5.12 as the IP address I want to connect to. And then we're going to log in as Adama. Now, keep in mind, this might have held over some credentials from a previous login, so I might get an error. No. Now, this certificate is a self-signed certificate, so you can, if you don't want to be bothered with this, you can just tell it, don't ask me again, and then click on yes, and then it'll just come up and do its thing. Let me drag this window up over here. So here we go. So now we're logged in via remote desktop. And now as long as we don't mess with Hyper-V and make any system changes like that, we're not going to have that problem where we lose our network connectivity. It should all be good here now. The other thing I don't need is I don't need Server Manager coming up every time I boot up. It's okay, but I don't need it. So I'm going to go over here to Manage, Server Manager Properties, and I'm going to click the checkbox. Do not start Server Manager automatically at login and click OK. And then I can get that little window or little menu window out of my way. And you can see there we are. We have Windows Server 2022 installed. And if I right click here and go to Task Manager, click on More Details, you'll see we are indeed running on the AMD Epyc, and we got all those lovely cores at our disposal. 128 gig of RAM and a gigabit network card. Let's go under Device Manager and see what else we got out here. Oops, we got some problems out here. Okay, so we've got some unknown devices, and we got some, video cards that aren't being identified, like this 3D video controller. Yeah, we got issues. So the next thing we probably want to do is we want to go download drivers for this motherboard. Good luck. You're gonna need to find them, and you're gonna need to download them in order for everything to work driver-wise. Now let's go see. Maybe I've already done this and I just have forgotten. So I'm going to go to my DS1621 is my NAS. Applications. And under there I ought to have an AMD, maybe? Do I have an AMD folder? AMD video. How about Epyc? Do I have an Epyc folder? How about Supermicro? I'm sure I have a Supermicro here. Okay, now all I gotta do is remember what motherboard I'm running. So nothing like doing things, just by the seat of your pants. I'm assuming this is an H11 SSL ICNC. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what motherboard I have in here. It could be the X10 SLHF, but I don't think so. I think this is an H11 series motherboard. And the reason I say that is because I've got some BIOS stuff out here, but I also have a CD out here. I'm going to double click on that and open it, and then I'm going to run setup 64 and see what happens. See if this is indeed a driver CD for Windows. All right, so I should read this carefully before installing. So, I should click the accept button. Okay, so yeah, I see lots of drivers. I see AMD SP3IO driver, plug-in driver. I'm just going to select all of these one at a time and see what happens. So I'm going to do this one first. Okay, it says not responding. We'll see what happens. There we go. Now it's installing the AMD chipset drivers. Okay, so it's pending Microsoft Visual C++ redistributable. I'm going to go ahead and tell it install that. And I'll agree to those terms. That's fine. Microsoft just, take over. And I assume those drivers are now installed. It's got a red check. I assume that's okay. Now I'm going to try this driver. Do next. I'll accept the terms of the license. Install. Okay. Now hopefully this software is intelligent to know if this is the wrong chipset, not to install it. Now, don't just do what I'm doing and blindly install shit. I'm assuming that I downloaded these drivers back in the day when I first got the board. But the old gray matter being what it is, I could be wrong on that. So always check and make sure you have the correct drivers and especially the INF files for your machine. You don't want to screw it up. So it says it's done. Now, I'm going to err on the side of caution. I don't think I need the net framework. It says it's optional. I don't think I need the ASpeed graphics driver. And I don't need the Intel Pro network connection drivers. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and reboot the system. And we'll come back once that's done. All right, so we've got another reboot under our belt. Let's go see if it had the hope, or it had the effect I hope it would. And it did. As you can see now, all of our little system device troubles have gone away, and it's properly identified the AMD devices. Now you're probably saying, screaming at me going, wait a minute. There's a video controller, a PCI device. There's a bunch of, yes, we'll get to those. Baby steps. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to download some drivers. And yes, the browser on Windows Server 2022 is just as invasive as the one on Windows 11. So let's see. Let's do NVIDIA 1650 drivers. I think I have a 1650 card in here. And mind you, I'm typing around the keyboard, so cut me some slack. So, yeah, okay, I agree. Sure, GeForce. This will be the 16, right? Yeah, 16 series. And mine is a lowly 1650. Let's get the Windows 11. It should be for Windows 11 and it should be for Server 2022. Well, these were just released in October. So this month, I'm going to go ahead and download this one. Now, there's another driver I need as well. I have a Tesla M40 video card in here. We'll get to that in a minute. The first driver I want to load, though, is for the 1650 in here. And I want to see if these drivers are going to work. So you can come along for the ride. So it should be under downloads. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. Now you could do this if you don't have access to Windows Server 2022, which you should. Microsoft makes this available. You can run it in trial mode for 180 days, and then you can reactivate it like 5 or 6 times. So in theory, you could run this thing in your lab. I don't think Microsoft will mind, but check with them to be sure. I've run evaluation copies of Server 2022 for years, so and Server 2019 for years in my lab, and yeah, I don't think they mind that. They encourage it. And then once you get your feet wet, you can take that with you when you go into corporate America or need to do IT work like that. So take advantage of that. That's why they make it so easy to have a non-pirated copy of their operating system. As long as you don't mind the watermark on the bottom, you can run it in trial mode for quite a long time and learn what you need to in your lab environment. So there, that being out of the way, it is a little bit different from Windows 10 and 11. Some of the drivers will work from Windows 10 and 11 under this version, some won't. It's like a hit and miss. This may not work, but that's why I'm doing it with you now. There we go. You just saw my driver pop up for the GTX 16. Oh, it's evidently a 1660 I have in here, not a 1650. Yeah, 1660. Bring this down here so I can see the drivers. Bring that over here. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's close this. All right, so now I've got the driver installed. What do you think it's time to do, folks, boys and girls? It's time to reboot again. All right, so we seem to have survived another reboot. Let's go to Device Manager and see what we got here. And there we are. So now we got our display adapter, a GeForce GTX 1660. And still this 3D video controller. So let's see if I can't get the drivers to load for this. Let's go back out to my NAS. And I think it is actually this driver that I'm wanting to use. We're about to find out. The problem is that these P series and M series Tesla cards, typically the cards come in TSSC mode, I believe, which is like grid mode for the card. You actually have to load the right driver and then go do a registry hack to put these drivers in what is called WDDM mode, which is the mode we want in order to be able to share it under the things we're going to share it under. So the key is getting the right combination of drivers and then the registry entry. Sometimes you don't have to do the registry entry, but I have not been able to pin down which specific instance you don't need to do this registry edit. All right, I'm hoping we got lucky. So let's go to Device Manager. We've rebooted now. Let's go to Device Manager and see if the 3D controller is... No, it's not there anymore. However, the GTX 1660 is giving us an error. Cannot load the drivers. Okay, well, this could be an issue then. That could be an issue. It was loading it previously, and it could be that the new drivers have thrown the old drivers out and not letting it... Yeah, you can see here. Probably what this means is, because I can't see the other video card on here, is that I'm going to need to do that registry hack. And I'm going to need to look that up. Let's see, HKey local machine. I'm going to try that, so I'm going to go ahead and reboot. And we'll come back once the reboot is complete. So here we are after reboot. And yeah, that fixed the Tesla M40 being seen, but as you can still see, the GTX 1660 is not working properly. And here's the thing. It was a nice try, right? You never know if something's going to work or not until you actually do it. And I like to share my failures as well as my successes with you. And I really don't consider this a failure. This was more of a, let's see how this works comparable to Proxmox. And it's evidently clear that this machine is better suited to have Proxmox on it and to then pass through these things to virtual machines as I need them, or in the exam for the M40 to divide that M40 up into multiple video cards that can then be passed through to virtual machines. So we're going to end up putting Proxmox back on this Epyc, but I wanted to share this with you just to show you what could or could not happen. Sometimes you get lucky with Windows, sometimes you get lucky with Proxmox. It really doesn't matter to me as long as it works. And for me, a better fit on this machine, this AMD Epyc, is going to definitely be Proxmox, but your mileage might vary. So sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but you never know unless you try. And that's what we did on this video. We tried. And while it was a nice idea in theory, in practice you saw we ran into all kinds of problems. And what that simply means is, for what I'm trying to do with this server, I'm better suited to run Proxmox on it. But I wouldn't have known that had I not tried to install Windows Server 2022. So I use a mixture in my lab, and I use a mixture of Proxmox, Hyper-V, and that's pretty much it for my hypervisors. Sometimes I'll use VMware Workstation, but not very often. It's just easier to spool up a virtual machine under Proxmox or under Hyper-V. But I do have a need for a Hyper-V for my production network, so I thought it would be fun to see if we could get it to install on the Epyc, but it just wasn't meant to be. And that's okay, because that's how you learn. And besides, the Epyc is part of my lab network anyway and really should have Proxmox on it. So there you go. We hope you found this video entertaining and informative as always. Please give us a thumbs up down below if you liked the video, and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and click that little notification bell to be notified of new videos when they come out. Donate if you're so inclined. PayPal, Patreon, YouTube join function, or just become a YouTube premium member. If you want to know how to get a hold of me, go to UnkyJoesPlayhouse.com, and all of our social media links are there. Thanks again for coming to see us, and don't forget, we'll see all of you on the other side.
I've been watching old Unky Joe. From Texas heat to where the cacti grow. Fixing server solar power in the land, hoping that his plans all stand, making life a touch more bright.